Have you ever wondered if there are souls lingering around us, unable to find peace because of an unresolved mystery? You might think these stories are just legends or rumors, but don't conclude too soon. And if you think you're safe, be cautious. For one day, you might encounter what we're about to tell you. Murders by the lake, mysterious deaths, and spirits that never let go. Welcome to a true story, not just about fish, but about mysteries, ghosts in the dark, and haunting images that can't be escaped. Don't let curiosity lead you to a place with no way out. Story 1. The Mystery of Lake Okeechobee. On an October night in 2012, David Spencer and 3 friends decided to camp and fish at Lake Okeechobee in Florida. The lake was long known for its eerie legends, but that only excited David and his friends even more. "I bet no one else is brave enough to fish here at midnight," David said proudly. "It's easy to say that, but let's see if you'll be running soon." Mark, one of his friends, replied with a laugh. As the night deepened, strange sounds grew more frequent, from the chorus of frogs to the gentle splashing of water against the shore. But it didn't deter them. David sat by his fishing rod, focused on the dark water. Suddenly, his rod jerked as though something heavy had gotten caught. "Got something? Hey, help me pull it in," David shouted. When they all pulled together, they went pale at the sight of a mud-stained black bag hooked to the line. A tense silence settled as they exchanged anxious glances. "Open it. What's inside?" Emma, a girl in the group, whispered nervously. Slowly, David opened the bag, and a foul smell filled the air. Inside was the decaying body of a woman, her eyes wide open and her mouth as if trying to speak. "Oh my God, what is this?" Mark exclaimed, stepping back. After reporting to the police, they stood by the lake, looking into the darkness, speechless. An elderly local woman, her hair white as snow, noticed the police and approached David's group. "You've seen her, haven't you?" she asked in a raspy voice, her gaze cloudy. "Do you know something about this?" David asked, voice trembling. "Her spirit is still in this lake. They say she was murdered and dumped here, but never found peace. Some say she haunts anyone who dares touch the lake at night," the old woman whispered, then disappeared into the night. Since then, anyone who visits Lake Okeechobee feels the woman's gaze from beneath the water, seeking release for her restless soul. After the horrifying event at Lake Okeechobee, David and his friends were haunted by the memory, feeling they could never escape her gaze. One night, David awoke drenched in sweat, hearing a whisper in his bedroom, "Give it back, give it back." Soon, a nightmare began to engulf David's life. He was haunted by visions of the woman emerging from the lake with her piercing stare, her pale fingers clutching his wrist. David became sleepless, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, afraid to leave his home. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, he returned to Lake Okeechobee, standing by the water's edge, shouting, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone." But instead of silence, the water stirred, and the woman's cold hand reached out to pull David into the black depths. When his friends found him the next morning, he had drowned, his face frozen in terror, as if he had seen something horrifying in his final moments. Story 2. The Murder on the Fishing Boat at Lake Michigan. In 1994, Tom Riddle, a middle-aged man, mysteriously disappeared while fishing on Lake Michigan. That day, he took his boat alone with all his fishing gear. When police found the drifting boat, everything was still in place except for a strange object on his fishing rod, an old shoe, caked in mud. "Who catches a shoe in the middle of the lake?" a young officer whispered. As they continued searching, a body surfaced. It was Tom, his face ghostly pale, eyes wide open. Around his neck were strangulation marks, as if someone had choked him from behind. News of Tom's mysterious death quickly spread, and a few weeks later, a group of fishermen reported hearing their names being called from somewhere in the middle of the lake at night. One night, local fishermen Jim and Jake decided to fish at the spot where Tom died, ignoring the rumors. "Do you feel a chill, Jake?" Jim asked, his voice shaky as he looked around. "A chill? You're thinking of Tom's death?" Stop that nonsense." Jake brushed it off, but a flicker of fear crossed his eyes. Suddenly, water splashed as Jim's rod jerked hard. He pulled it up, but instead of a fish, it was an old, moss-covered hat. "Hey, isn't this Tom's hat?" Jim asked, a chill running down his spine. Just then, in the middle of the lake, a strange hissing sound echoed. They looked out and saw a shadowy figure floating on the water, staring straight at them. "Let's go, now!" Jake screamed, and they rowed back to shore with pounding hearts, not daring to look back at the figure. After that terrifying night on Lake Michigan, Jim and Jake couldn't shake the memory of the cold, staring eyes of the figure. Though they vowed never to return to the lake, they remained haunted, as if an invisible force kept pulling them back. Jim began to lose sleep, haunted by nightmares of Tom, the man who died on the lake. One night, unable to resist the whisper echoing in his mind, Jim drove to the lake, alone in his boat in the silent night. He whispered, "Tom, if you want something, tell me." Instantly, the water rippled, and Tom's form appeared once more. But this time, he wasn't silent. His face twisted with hatred, and he screamed, "You saw me die and didn't help. Don't think you'll escape." His scream echoed across the lake. And the next morning, Jim's body was found drowned, his eyes wide open as if he'd seen something horrifying. Jake, the remaining friend, decided to leave town when he heard of Jim's death. But no matter where he went, he would hear Tom's voice calling in his dreams. And every morning, he woke with the smell of lake water on his hands. No one ever saw Jake again after that. Some say Tom's spirit claimed him too, pulling him back to Lake Michigan to settle the blood debt. Story 3. The Curse of the Sacramento River. In 2005, Michael Reeves decided to go fishing on the Sacramento River, a place rumored to be cursed for decades. Many people were said to have mysteriously disappeared there, and their souls were believed to haunt the river. That night, Michael paddled his boat to the middle of the river, his flashlight illuminating the dark waters. Everything seemed quiet, with only the sounds of insects breaking the silence. "There's nothing to fear, just a river," Michael reassured himself, trying to stay calm. Suddenly, his rod jerked violently. Michael reeled it in and saw something strange as he pulled it closer to the surface. It was an old, muddy prosthetic hand, covered in dried blood. "What the hell is this?" Recoiling. Then he heard a whisper right behind him. "Michael, why did you come here?" He spun around, but no one was there. The night was silent, yet cold as though holding a deadly secret. Without hesitating, Michael turned his boat back to shore. But as soon as he placed his paddle in the water, he saw a figure slowly emerging in front of him. The figure was a man, ghostly white, his eyes staring straight at Michael. "You disturb my rest," the shadow whispered, as if rising from the depths of the river. Michael panicked, paddling as fast as he could, but the shadow stayed close no matter how far he went. After Michael escaped the river, he told his story, but no one believed him until police found a decayed body, seemingly the same man Michael had seen. Though he tried to forget the experience, Michael was haunted by the whisper in his dreams. "You disturbed my rest." Despite avoiding the Sacramento River, Michael couldn't escape the cold gaze of the spirit he had seen. One night, as the whispers grew unbearable, Michael returned to the river. He stood on the bank, screaming into the darkness, "I did nothing. Leave me alone." But the only response was the gentle lapping of the waves, and a voice filled with anger. "Only death can end this curse." Soon after, Michael's body was found drifting on the river, his face ghostly pale with terror. Police found a necklace with the name Sarah engraved on it, though no one knew of a Sarah connected to Michael or the river. Locals said the Sacramento River had claimed Michael as its latest victim, adding him to the hundreds of lost souls before him. Now, anyone approaching the river at night might hear Michael's distant whispers for help. From then on, the Sacramento River became a place no one dared approach after dark, haunted by vengeful spirits of those who died there. Those who didn't heed the warnings, the curious who kept exploring, have become part of their own story. forever bound to a mysterious death with no escape. Story 4. The White Lake and the Threat from Below. Summer, 1992. White Lake, Michigan, USA. On a hot summer day in 1992, a group of 3 close friends decided to take a weekend fishing trip to White Lake, a secluded lake deep in the woods of Michigan. Known for its natural beauty, the lake also carried eerie rumors passed down by the locals about unexplainable events. White Lake was a popular spot for anglers, but there were strange whispers about a certain area in the middle of the lake where the waters were always unnaturally dark and murky, as though something was waiting beneath the surface. The seasoned fishermen of the area would avoid that section, but for these 3 friends, their curiosity was stronger than any fear. The trio, Mike, John, and David, prepared for a weekend of fishing. They drove to the lake's dock early in the morning, as the mist still hadn't cleared, shrouding everything around them. All that could be heard was the soft lapping of the water against the boat and distant birds calling out through the fog. As they lowered the boat into the water, the faint light of the sun filtered through the mist, casting reflections on the still surface of the lake. Everything seemed peaceful, yet that silence felt heavier with every passing moment, as if the lake itself were guarding a dark secret. "Nothing's gonna happen. We're just here to fish," Mike said, dismissing the warnings of the locals they'd heard earlier. After casting their lines, the group sat silently, waiting, but something strange started to happen. Despite the lake's reputation for hosting giant fish, none of them caught anything after several hours. Instead, there were odd noises coming from beneath the surface, like the scraping of something large dragging along the bottom. The air began to feel thick, and all 3 of them could sense that something was wrong. Suddenly, John, one of the group, stood up abruptly, his eyes wide with terror. "Guys, do you hear that? Something's moving toward us," he said, his voice trembling. "Don't worry, it's just fish," Mike replied, trying to sound calm. But when he turned around, his face went pale. Something big, very big, was moving under the water, and it didn't look like any fish they had ever seen. The scraping noises grew louder, and the water seemed to shift in waves, as though something enormous was making its way toward their boat. The small ripples on the surface became larger and stopped abruptly, like there was some unseen presence beneath the lake. David started to feel uneasy, whispering to the others, "We should head back now." But as they tried to turn the boat around, a powerful force yanked it out toward the middle of the lake. Everything happened so fast and uncontrollably. They couldn't move, and all they could do was watch the surface of the lake rise in large waves, as though a monstrous creature was surfacing from the depths. At that moment, a loud, terrifying roar echoed from below the water. The fish suddenly leaped out of the water in frantic bursts, splashing wildly, and the 3 friends panicked. A massive, shadowy figure began to emerge from the lake, its glowing eyes like fiery orbs. Mike, John, and David couldn't believe their eyes, but it was truly there, right beneath their boat. In a moment of sheer chaos, the boat capsized, and all 3 friends plunged into the icy water. They desperately swam toward the shore, but when they looked back, the lake was calm again, as if nothing had happened. Days later, when rescue teams arrived to search for them, they found only the overturned boat and some personal belongings. There was no sign of the 3 friends. They had vanished without a trace, never to return. The incident became one of the most bizarre and haunting disappearances in the area around White Lake. The locals still tell stories that on misty nights, you can hear strange sounds coming from the middle of the lake, and sometimes, shadows can be seen moving across the surface of the water. White Lake isn't just home to giant fish. It holds secrets that should never be uncovered. The story of the 3 friends is still talked about, but no one can explain what truly happened that day. Perhaps their spirits still wander somewhere, trapped in the lake's haunting depths, unable to find peace. So, are these stories just legends? Or are they only just beginning? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the story isn't over. And next time, when you look into the water, Remember, you might see something staring back, something you'd never want to know. Be careful, or you may become part of the next story.